The Galactic Council had ruled the known universe for centuries. Empires rose and fell at their command, species were conquered or exterminated as they saw fit, and no civilization had ever defied them and survived. They were the absolute authority, an unstoppable force. And then, humanity arrived. At first, the Council dismissed Earth as just another primitive world, an aggressive, warlike species too undisciplined to be a true threat. They let humans spread, even hiring them as mercenaries and laborers, believing their strength and resilience could be useful. But then, humans fought back. It started with small rebellions on the outer colonies. Then came daring raids against Council warships, precision strikes against supply lines, and elite human soldiers carving through entire legions of the Council's best warriors. The Council responded with overwhelming force. They deployed armadas, glassed planets suspected of harboring rebels, and executed human prisoners live for the entire galaxy to see. Yet, no matter how many humans they slaughtered, more kept coming. They fought harder, smarter, more ruthlessly. And now, in their arrogance, the Council believed they had finally made an example that would break humanity's spirit. They had captured Lieutenant Commander Eric Voss. He was no ordinary soldier. A Navy SEAL. An operative trained in the deadliest environments, a ghost in the shadows, a predator who had spent his entire life hunting enemies of the United States. The Council didn't understand what they had in their grasp. They only saw a broken prisoner, battered from weeks of captivity and interrogations. They believed he was powerless. They were wrong. The execution event. The live execution had been planned for weeks. Billions across the galaxy tuned in to watch. The Council wanted to send a message, a display of absolute dominance. Aboard the Dominion Prime, the Council's flagship and the largest warship ever built, an execution chamber had been transformed into a spectacle. The walls were lined with alien dignitaries, high-ranking military officials, and powerful warlords who had come to witness the downfall of Earth's so-called warriors. In the center of the chamber, a raised platform stood beneath a massive guillotine-like structure. Unlike a traditional blade, this one burned with an energy field capable of slicing through even the most advanced armor. At the far end of the chamber, High Executor Joran Cole stood tall, his reptilian features twisted into a smirk. Cole was the Council's enforcer, a warlord feared across the stars, the architect behind many of humanity's greatest defeats. He turned to face the cameras, his deep voice echoing through the chamber and into the billions of broadcasts across the galaxy. "Let all who defy us witness the fate of Earth's champions," he declared. This one, he gestured toward the prisoner, was once among their finest. He led many of the cowardly human attacks against our forces. He killed thousands. But now, he will die screaming like the rest. The chamber roared with applause. The camera feed panned to the prisoner. Lieutenant Commander Eric Voss stood in the center of the platform, his hands bound in thick energy restraints. His body bore the signs of captivity, bruises, cuts, the scars of relentless interrogation. His clothes were in tatters, and his face was partially obscured by strands of sweat-matted hair. But his eyes. They remained calm. Steady. Unbroken. Cole stepped forward, holding a massive plasma blade, its edge humming with power. He gestured to the audience, drawing out the moment for dramatic effect. "Let this be a warning to those who still resist the Council. Earth is weak. Humanity is broken. And those who fight against us will end up like him." The crowd roared. The cameras zoomed in. The executioner, a hulking Brakthar, stepped forward, gripping a ceremonial lever connected to the guillotine's release. Cole raised his blade high above his head. And then, everything changed. The moment everything went wrong. The second the plasma blade swung downward, Voss moved. His body reacted with precise, trained instinct. Every muscle, every nerve had been conditioned for this moment, not for weeks, not for months, but for years of brutal Navy SEAL training. In the split second before the blade could sever his head, Voss twisted. His bound hands, positioned just right, shifted under the plasma's heat, melting the restraints just enough to give him slack. The guillotine missed by inches. The executioner realized too late. Voss lunged, snapping his freed hands up and grabbing the Brakthar's wrist. With a sudden, brutal motion, he wrenched it back, snap. Bone and muscle tearing in an instant. The executioner howled in agony. The plasma blade clattered to the ground. The chamber erupted into chaos. Cole's smirk vanished. "Kill him." Voss was already moving. He pivoted, driving his elbow into the Brakthar's throat, crushing the alien's windpipe. The executioner staggered back, gurgling, before collapsing in a heap. One down. The guards rushed forward, but they hesitated. This was supposed to be an easy kill. None of them had expected a fight. Voss seized the plasma blade from the floor. Bad decision. The first guard lunged, Voss ducked under the strike and slashed upward, cutting through armor and flesh alike. A spray of alien blood painted the execution platform. The second guard raised a plasma rifle, Voss threw the blade, embedding it deep into the alien's chest. The guard collapsed. The execution chamber was in full panic. Diplomats scrambled. Warlords shouted orders. Soldiers poured in through the entrance. Voss locked eyes with Cole. For the first time in his life, the High Executor looked afraid. Shoot him. Shoot him now. The guards opened fire. Voss dove into a roll, snatching the plasma rifle from the fallen guard's hands. He came up in a crouch and fired. Crack. The first bolt took out a guard's kneecap. Crack. The second tore through another skull. He needed an exit. The execution chamber's far doors slammed shut, locking him in. More guards were flooding in through side passages. He was outnumbered, surrounded. But he thrived in impossible odds. Voss sprinted toward the nearest wall, where the security cameras were mounted. A maintenance panel, unguarded. He flipped the plasma rifle, setting it to overcharge. Then he threw it. The weapon struck the panel and exploded in a burst of white-hot energy. The force sent bodies flying, and more importantly, disabled the security grid. Lights flickered. The chamber plunged into momentary darkness. By the time emergency power kicked in, Voss was gone. The council watches in horror. Across the galaxy, billions of viewers sat in stunned silence. The most powerful government in the universe had just tried to execute a human Navy SEAL on live broadcast. And in less than 30 seconds, that same human had turned the entire event into a massacre. On the council's capital world, in the Grand War Chamber, rulers and generals watched the blackout feed with growing horror. One of them swallowed hard and whispered the question that was on everyone's mind. Where is he now? The answer came seconds later. Through the screams. And the sound of gunfire. The Dominion Prime was no ordinary warship. It was the warship. A city-sized titan drifting through the void, built to enforce the Galactic Council's rule with absolute authority. No prisoner had ever escaped its walls. No enemy had ever set foot inside without being swiftly executed. That was before Lieutenant Commander Eric Voss. Now, alarms screamed through the corridors. Red emergency lights pulsed in rapid succession, bathing the gunmetal walls in crimson flashes. Confused voices crackled over intercoms as guards scrambled to contain the chaos that had just erupted in the execution chamber. Voss was gone. And he had become the hunter. The hunt begins. Voss moved like a shadow through the ventilation shafts. Every muscle in his body was honed for this moment, every lesson learned from years of brutal SEAL training coming into play. He had been in worse situations before. Deep behind enemy lines. No backup. No reinforcements. Only his wits, instincts, and ruthlessness to carry him through. He assessed his situation. Weapons, none. Gear, tattered prison rags. Injuries, bruised ribs. Torn muscles. Nothing that would slow him down. Enemy force, an entire damn warship. Voss grinned. Good. A challenge worth his time. He crawled through the tight metal shaft, using the ship's ventilation system to map out his next move. Through the grates, he could hear the council's soldiers barking orders. Lock down all sectors. Check every corridor. He couldn't have gotten far. All hands, this is High Executor call. The human must not escape. Voss smirked. Cole was scared. He should be. Voss had no intention of escaping. The first kill. He reached a maintenance hatch above one of the security rooms. Below, two alien guards stood, rifles slung across their backs, arguing. Executor Cole should have let me shoot him when we had the chance. I know. We should have burned him to ash. Wait, do you hear that? Too late. Voss dropped silently, landing behind them. In a single fluid motion, he snapped the first guard's neck, twisting it with practiced efficiency. The alien fell without a sound. The second guard turned, mouth opening to scream. Voss rammed his elbow into the alien's throat, crushing his windpipe. The soldier collapsed, gagging and convulsing on the floor. Voss crouched beside him, watching as the light faded from his eyes. 2 down. Thousands to go. Arming the predator. Voss stripped the guards of their gear, 2 plasma rifles, 3 power cells, a combat knife, and a wrist-mounted holo interface. Perfect. He checked the interface. It gave him limited access to the ship's security systems. The Dominion Prime was huge, but he wasn't looking for an escape route. He was looking for targets. Where's the army? A quick scan of the interface revealed its location, Deck 17, Sector B. He grinned. Time to stock up. The army raid. The corridors were swarming with guards. Voss used the shadows, moving with precise efficiency, eliminating isolated patrols, slipping through side passages, never leaving a trace of his presence beyond cooling bodies and pools of alien blood. By the time he reached Deck 17, alarms had changed. They knew. The ship's security AI had finally registered how many bodies were piling up. Automated turrets were deployed. Hallways were sealing off. Voss didn't slow down. A security checkpoint stood between him and the army, a barricade of heavy blast doors with reinforced guards posted behind cover. A frontal assault was suicide. Voss gripped a plasma grenade from a fallen guard's belt and rolled it down the hallway. The moment the guards noticed, it was too late. Boom. The explosion tore through the barricade, sending debris and alien limbs flying. Before the dust settled, Voss rushed in. Plasma fire erupted from the remaining guards. He dove into a slide, raising his rifle and squeezing the trigger in rapid succession. Crack crack crack. 1 headshot. 2 centamass kills. 1 double tap to finish the last one. The corridor went silent. Voss stepped over the smoking bodies and into the army. Rows of weapons lined the walls, plasma rifles, shock batons, explosives, even experimental railguns. It was Christmas morning. He strapped an adaptive combat harness over his prison rags, loading it with extra power cells and grenades. He grabbed 2 high-powered plasma SMGs and slung an ion-charged sniper rifle over his back. Finally, he clipped an energy blade to his belt, a sleek, deadly weapon with a vibrating edge that could carve through most armor like butter. Voss looked at his reflection in the glass panel. No longer a prisoner. Now? Now he was war. The Council's fear grows. In the Grand War Chamber, High Executor Cole slammed his fist against the control panel, his reptilian face twisted in rage. He's in the army? The security officers surrounding him flinched. Yes, High Executor, one of them stammered. The human, he's eliminating our forces with terrifying efficiency. He doesn't fight like normal warriors. He what? Cole growled. He hunts them. Cole's blood ran cold. He turned to the War Council. Deploy every available unit. Seal off that deck and... Sir, another officer interrupted, panic in his voice. We can't. He disabled our lockdown systems. Cole's hands trembled. A single human. A lone Navy SEAL. And the Dominion Prime was losing. The Predator strikes back. Voss emerged from the army fully equipped, rolling his shoulders. Time to test his new toys. He heard heavy boots, reinforcements coming down the corridor. He crouched behind a pillar, waiting. Counting. 7 enemies. The moment the first one stepped through, Voss fired his sniper rifle from the hip. Crack. A clean shot, directly through the first soldier's skull, the plasma round tearing out the back of his helmet. The others barely had time to react. Voss switched to his SMGs and charged. Crack crack crack. 1 down. 2 down. 3. He rolled, dodging plasma fire, tossing a grenade into the remaining squad. Boom. The last alien was thrown against the wall, dazed. Voss sprinted forward and buried his energy blade into its chest. It gasped, eyes wide in horror, struggling weakly before slumping against the wall. Voss pulled the blade free. The hallway was silent. Blood pooled around him. Smoke lingered in the air. He wasn't even breathing hard. The ship's intercom crackled. Voss. He looked up. Cole's voice. I don't know how you think this ends, human, but you are trapped aboard my warship. I will not let you escape. Voss tilted his head, amused. He activated the holo interface he'd stolen earlier and hacked into the intercom system. His voice, calm and deadly, echoed across the entire ship. Who said anything about escaping? There was a pause. Then, for the first time in his life, High Executor Cole felt true, primal fear. Voss moved through the ship like a specter, every kill more precise than the last. The Dominion Prime was built for war, not for him. The ship's vast corridors, secured blast doors, and towering defense turrets were meant to keep invaders out, not stop a predator already inside. By now, the bodies were piling up. Entire squads had been sent after him. None returned. The ship's once sterile hallways were smeared with alien blood, smoking plasma burns, and shattered armor plates. The Dominion Prime's crew was beginning to feel it, a shift in the air, a growing fear. This wasn't a simple security breach. It was a war of attrition. And Voss was winning. High Executor calls growing desperation. Inside the command chamber, High Executor calls claws dug into the armrest of his throne-like chair. His eyes flickered between security feeds, most showing darkened corridors, the flicker of emergency lights, and piles of bodies. Where is he? Cole hissed. No one answered. His senior officers, usually so full of arrogant confidence, now stood pale and silent. The human wasn't just killing them, he was breaking them. Cole slammed his fist against the console. Deploy Omega Protocol. I want every automated turret, every combat droid, and every damnable soldier hunting that thing down. A hesitant security officer swallowed. Sir, we already did. A moment of silence. Then Cole turned, his face ashen. And? The officer exhaled, shaking. They're all dead. Cole felt the cold chill of realization settle in. This isn't a man. This is something else. The seal strikes where it hurts. Voss reached Deck 12, Engineering Bay. The heart of the Dominion Prime's power grid. A fortress of machinery, massive reactor cores humming with energy. Thick cables snaked along the walls, feeding power through the ship. Disable this, and the whole warship becomes a coffin drifting in space. Voss grinned. It was time to turn out the lights. A battlefield in the dark. The second Voss entered, the ship's defense grid activated. Turrets whirred to life, their glowing barrels locking onto him. Combat drones, eight-legged metallic nightmares, scuttled from the walls, plasma cannons warming up. A voice thundered over the intercom. You're trapped, human. Cole's voice was filled with rage. No more running. No more hiding. Die. Voss exhaled. Time to go loud. He yanked a flash grenade from his belt and hurled it forward. Boom. A blinding explosion filled the room, sending enemy targeting systems haywire. Voss was already moving, dodging between towering generators, firing on the run. His plasma SMG spat blue-hot death, cutting down the first wave of combat drones. BZZT. A turret fired, he dove, sliding under a burst of plasma fire before vaulting over a control panel, landing into a crouch. Another drone lunged, Voss spun, catching it mid-air, twisting its metallic limbs until something inside snapped. The turrets readjusted, Voss grabbed an EMP grenade, tossing it straight into their cluster. Zap! Boom! Circuits fried. Turrets collapsed. Sparks rained from the ceiling as the engineering bay erupted into chaos. Voss moved toward the power relays, dodging fire, leaving nothing but ruin in his wake. Turning the Dominion Prime into a coffin. Voss reached the primary reactor control panel. A single override command would cripple the entire ship. Warning, system locked. Nice try. Voss smirked, slapping the stolen holo interface onto the console. It immediately began running a bypass, an old Earth military algorithm designed to breach alien security. 15 seconds until override. Voss turned, gripping his rifle. He could hear it, heavy boots. The elite guard was coming. Good. He had just enough bullets left. The last stand of the elite guard. The door to the engineering bay blew open. Through the smoke, a dozen of Cole's finest warriors stormed in. Elite Dominion enforcers, bulky armor, state-of-the-art weaponry, trained killers. They weren't like the others. They wouldn't run. Voss nodded to himself. Finally. A real fight. Time until system override, 10 seconds. The first enforcer opened fire, Voss dove, returning shots mid-roll, striking two between the eyes before landing behind a generator. Plasma bolts tore through the air, explosions rattling the room. Voss moved like a ghost. A grenade arced toward him, he caught it mid-air and flung it back. Boom. 3 more down. A massive alien lunged with an energy blade, Voss sidestepped, grabbing its arm and twisting, forcing the alien's own blade into its throat. The last enforcer charged, Voss ducked low, slicing across its legs, then spun behind, shoving a plasma pistol under its helmet and pulling the trigger. 3 seconds left. The last alien collapsed, twitching. Voss exhaled. Too easy. The override completed, the room shook as the ship's main power grid collapsed. Lights flickered. Engines sputtered. The Dominion Prime, the Galactic Council's prized warship, was now nothing more than a drifting tomb. Voss stepped over the bodies, adjusting his stolen armor. He activated the intercom. Hey, Cole? Silence. Then, the High Executive's voice, soft, trembling. What have you done? Voss smirked. I made this fair. A pause. Then, a whisper of dread from the alien leader. You'll Coming for me. Voss's grin widened. Damn right I am. The Dominion Prime was dying. Without power, the once mighty warship drifted in space, emergency lights flickering weakly. Life support systems were failing. Doors jammed. Communications flickered between static-laden distress calls. Voss moved through the darkened halls, his steps silent. He was no longer a man hunted. He was the hunter now. High Executor Call's last hope. Inside the command chamber, High Executor Call's talons dug into the armrests of his command throne. He stared at the horrifying feed, his best warriors slaughtered, the ship's corridors strewn with bodies. And the human, still alive. Call's officers were panicking. Sir, we have to evacuate. The ship is compromised. Our escape pods are still functional. We must leave before. Call's hand shot out, claws slashing across the officer's throat. The alien gurgled, slumping forward as blood pooled on the command console. The chamber fell into silence. No one leaves, Call snarled, his voice dripping with venom. We will kill this thing. His remaining bodyguards shifted uneasily. One of them, a senior officer, finally spoke. Sir, we've thrown everything at him. Squads. Turrets. The elite guard. Cole turned slowly, his eyes burning. And? The officer hesitated. Then, voice barely above a whisper. He's still coming. A cold dread settled over the room. Then. Thud. A sound. Distant. But unmistakable. Thud. Cole's eyes snapped to the door. The sound was getting closer. Thud. The guards raised their weapons, shifting nervously. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows. Then, silence. The guards exchanged wary glances. Maybe his. Boom. The door exploded inward, sending a wave of fire and shrapnel through the chamber. Two guards were ripped apart, their bodies flung across the room. Out of the smoke, stepped Voss. Armor scorched. Gun smoking. Eyes cold. A specter of death. The final stand of the High Executor's Guard. Open fire. Cole roared. Plasma filled the air, a wall of energy screaming toward the seal. Voss was already moving. He dove forward, rolling through the barrage, his rifle spitting death. The first guard took a shot between the eyes, dropping instantly. Voss slid behind the throne, using it as cover. A grenade arced toward him, he caught it midair and flung it back. Boom. Two more guards were engulfed in fire, their armor melting. A massive enforcer charged, plasma blade humming, fangs bared. Voss dodged at the last second, grabbing the alien's wrist and twisting, the blade drove into its own gut. The alien screamed, its body convulsing before collapsing in a heap. Only Cole and one guard remained. The last soldier hesitated, just for a second. Voss fired. A single shot. The guard's helmet snapped back as a smoking hole appeared between its eyes. It hit the floor with a dull thud. Voss turned to Cole. The High Executor was alone. A predator meets his prey. Cole staggered backward, his confidence shattered. This, he shook his head, disbelief on his face. This is impossible. Voss stepped forward, slow and deliberate. You thought humans were weak. Cole's claws twitched toward a plasma dagger at his belt. You thought we were prey. Voss dropped his rifle, cracking his knuckles. But you never met me. Cole lunged, dagger flashing. Voss sidestepped easily, catching Cole's wrist and twisting. The blade clattered to the floor. Cole snarled, swinging with his other arm. Voss blocked, countered with a brutal punch to the gut. The alien choked, doubling over. Voss grabbed Cole by the throat and slammed him into the control console. Sparks flew as machinery shattered beneath the impact. Cole gasped, struggling, his eyes wide with terror. Wait. We can make a deal. Voss tightened his grip. No deals. He lifted Cole off the ground, then slammed him down again, shattering the alien's ribs. Cole coughed purple blood, his body convulsing. Please. Voss leaned in. You called me an animal. Cole's breathing was ragged. Why you are? Voss grinned. Then you should have never stepped into my jungle. Then, he snapped Cole's neck. The High Executor's body slumped, lifeless. The warship's command throne, once a symbol of Dominion rule, was now a blood-stained monument to their greatest failure. A seal's escape. Voss exhaled, stepping over the corpse. The ship rumbled. Without power, it was losing orbit, being slowly pulled toward a nearby gas giant. Time to go. Voss moved to the escape pods, his pace calm. No more guards. No more obstacles. The ship was dead, just like its crew. He reached the launch bay, stepping into an alien pod. The controls were unfamiliar, but he'd already hacked the systems. The hatch sealed. Engines ignited. With a roar, the pod launched, Voss watching through the viewport as the Dominion Prime drifted toward the planet's crushing gravity. A fitting burial ground for the fools who thought they could hunt a human. The Galactic Council reacts. Days later, the Galactic Council convened in a secret chamber. The footage of Voss's rampage had spread. The greatest warship of the Dominion, reduced to a floating graveyard. Their best warriors, hunted like animals. The High Executor, executed like a common criminal. The room was silent. Then, an elder counselor spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. This human. This Voss. Another counselor swallowed hard. He is unlike any we have encountered. A pause. Then, a single chilling statement. If he is not the only one, then we are doomed. And across the galaxy, the legend of the deadliest predator in the stars had just begun. The destruction of the Dominion Prime sent shockwaves across the galaxy. News of one human, a single warrior who had hunted the High Executor aboard his own warship, spread like wildfire. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council faced something they could not control. Their most powerful fleet commander was dead. An entire armada ship, reduced to a floating tomb. And the being responsible? A Navy SEAL. One man. One unstoppable predator. The council chambers, usually filled with confident arrogance, now reeked of fear. The council's decision, annihilation. We cannot allow this to continue, rasped Chancellor Vorzet, his insectoid mandibles clicking with barely restrained panic. The Dominion Prime was a warship. It had thousands of elite soldiers. If a single human did this. He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. A silence settled over the chamber. Then, Admiral Krexver of the Wildfire Dominion spoke, his reptilian eyes narrowing. We have underestimated them before, he growled. But we will not do so again. He turned toward the assembled galactic leaders. I propose an extermination order. The humans must be wiped out before they spread. A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. A vote was cast. And with it, humanity's extinction was signed into motion. The fleet sent to hunt Voss. The largest fleet ever assembled was mobilized. 400 warships. 5 dreadnoughts. Over 1 million alien troops. Their target? Nathan Voss. They tracked his escape pod's trajectory, triangulating its course. He had landed on an uncharted jungle moon deep in the Hadar expanse. The Galactic Council was determined to eliminate him before he could escape, before his actions inspired others like him. This wasn't just war anymore. It was a purge. The jungle becomes a graveyard. The fleet's drop ships descended onto the jungle moon, deploying thousands of heavily armed alien troopers. Voss watched from the trees, hidden in the thick canopy. He had seen invasions before. This wasn't one. This was a massacre waiting to happen. Except the council had made a mistake. A fatal mistake. They weren't hunting him. He was hunting them. Predator against an army. The first squad of aliens moved cautiously through the undergrowth, their infrared sensors scanning for movement. They found nothing. Then, a flash of motion. A whisper of a knife through the air. A soldier gurgled, his throat silently cut before he even knew what had happened. Another turned, only for a bullet to rip through his skull. Within seconds, the squad was gone. Voss moved like a ghost, using the jungle to his advantage. He set up traps, spiked pits, explosive tripwires, deadfalls that crushed entire patrols. They brought in scanners. He jammed them. They deployed drones. He hacked them, turning their own machines against them. One by one, squads disappeared into the jungle. Panic set in. Commanders screamed orders, but it was useless. The army was fighting a force they couldn't see. And Voss was only getting started. A nightmare for the Council's forces. Hours turned into days. The jungle, once a mere battlefield, became a graveyard. The aliens stopped calling it a war. They called it a slaughter. The fleet orbiting above listened in horror as reports came through. Entire battalions wiped out. Elite shock troops annihilated. Commanders' voices turned from confidence to terror. This isn't war, one whispered. It's hunting. Then, silence. Their signals went dead. Voss had destroyed their communications array. They were cut off. The death of the fleet. The admirals above made a desperate decision. Orbital bombardment. If they couldn't kill Voss on the ground, they would turn the entire moon into glass. Dreadnoughts powered up their planet-cracking cannons. A countdown began. 5. Voss climbed to a high ridge, looking at the sky. 4. He activated a stolen transmitter, one he'd taken from a fallen alien officer. 3. He uploaded a virus, a digital warhead that would cripple the fleet systems. 2. The ships above suddenly flickered, power failing, engines shutting down. 1. Voss smiled. Then, hell erupted. The fleet, paralyzed, was now defenseless. And from the darkness of space, human stealth cruisers decloaked. The US Navy had arrived. The turning tide, humanity strikes back. The alien fleet, crippled by Voss's cyber attack, never saw it coming. Human warships descended like predators, unleashing a barrage of firepower. Dominion dreadnoughts, once seen as unstoppable, were ripped apart in minutes. The battle turned into a massacre. The humans didn't come for survival. They came for revenge. For Voss. For every human colony burned. For every prisoner enslaved. For every child executed in the Dominion's wars. They came for blood. Within an hour, the Galactic Council's Grand Fleet was gone. And in its place, floating in the wreckage, was a single transmission. A warning. The message that changed the galaxy. Across the Galactic Council's worlds, every screen, every holofeed, every transmission played the same message. It was grainy, dark. But the voice was unmistakable. Nathan Voss. You thought you could exterminate us. A pause. You failed. The camera panned, revealing the burning wreckage of the Galactic Fleet behind him. Another pause. You came to hunt me. A chilling grin. But now, I'm hunting you. The feed cut off. The galaxy stood still. Fear, once reserved for humanity, now crawled into the bones of every alien leader. For the first time in history, the predators became the prey. And the legend of the deadliest Navy SEAL in the stars had only just begun.